You know, in recent days, I've seen a lot of discussion about Quinten Post. Is Quinten Post for real? How serious is his defense? Do we need to see him play more before determining that what he's done so far this season is about as real as it gets? Or have we still not seen enough? The stats tell you that Quinten Post defensively is one of the best centers in the entire NBA. Is this actually true? Do the things that he does on the floor for the Warriors support these statistics that are saying that Quinten Post is a top defensive center in the entire NBA? And is this something that he can sustain throughout the rest of the season? If you follow this channel, you know that I have no doubt that Quinten Post right now is the best defender on this team. In terms of overall importance, Quinten Post has leaped Draymond Green as the most important defender on this team. In this video, I'm going to share some incredible stats with you, and I'm going to show you a whole lot of film on why what we've seen from Quinten Post so far this season is very real. His viability as the anchor of this team is not going anywhere, and it's only going to continue to improve as he plays more and more. So we'll go over all of those nuances, and if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. So as you know, about a few weeks ago, I shared with you that Quinten Post has entered the top 10 defensive rated players in the entire NBA. And over time, he just kept climbing up that list. He was 8, 7, 6, and then eventually he entered top 5. Top 5 defensively rated player in the entire NBA. This guy who was picked 52nd overall in his draft and is getting paid just a little under $2 million this season is a top 5 defensively rated player in the entire NBA. And this stat is constantly moving. Just yesterday, he was in the top 3. He's constantly competing for a position with a bunch of OKC Thunder players. And because the Thunder played last night and had another amazing performance, Quinten Post dropped back down to number 5. Now take a look at this list. Quinten Post is top 4 on this list for players who are most negatively impacted when they are off the floor. What happens to their team when this player is off the floor? So you can see the top 3 players on this list are Keita, Gobert, and Wembanyama. When Quinten Post is not on the floor for the Warriors, they suffer. And you gotta understand, when Quinten Post is not on the floor, usually it's Draymond Green who is on the floor. Absolutely incredible stat. Quinten Post also leads the team in plus minus. Now when it comes to defensive rating, different websites have different stats. I'm not quite sure how they measure the defensive rating exactly, but NBA.com, the official website of the NBA, has Quinten Post at number 1 for the Warriors by far. StatMuse will tell you that he's actually number 3 on the list. Al Horford and GP2 are somehow ahead of him. D'Anthony Melton is number 1, but I'm not going to count that because he's only played 2 games. And here's another really cool stat where Quinten Post is in the top 5 list of centers whose team creates the greatest margin of victory whenever they are on the floor. Yeah, only 4 players above him on this list: Steven Adams, Keita, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Jalen Duren. And to be honest with you, I think the only reason Quinten Post is not higher on all these stats and lists that I just showed you is because there's been a bunch of games where he didn't have enough of an opportunity to play. The more minutes he would have played, the more opportunities he would have gotten, the greater the result for Quinten Post and the Warriors. So I've given you a bunch of incredible stats when it comes to Quinten Post. Now the question is, does the film support all these things? Is this all a coincidence? Is this all just a part of the fact that he's just a part of some team scheme, or is the team's defense ultimately greater because of what Quinten Post is doing out there? I'm going to explain to you in a lot of different scenarios why the things that he shows in these clips that I'm about to show you is about as real as it's going to get, because it's rooted in fundamentals. It's a matter of whether he can replicate the things that he's doing on the floor consistently, whether it's guarding a man one-on-one in the post, out in the perimeter, pick and roll defense, recovering on a 3-point shooter, all these things. The first thing that I want to show you is his individual defensive ability, the one-on-one stuff, whether it's in the post against a really big guy, against a really notable guy, a great scorer. The first thing I want to show you is his defensive ability in the post against bigger bodies, guys that are capable of scoring against anybody, guys with a lot of size, guys with a lot of skill. How does Quinten Post fare against competition when it's players of his size or somebody close to his size or bigger or more athletic and so on and so forth? So I want to start this off with Quinten Post's defense inside the paint regardless of the size of the player. It could be a small and speedy point guard. It could be a top 10 scorer in the NBA. It could be a big man that has given the Warriors a lot of trouble over the years. Let's just go through it one by one. I'm going to start this off with his matchup against Ja Morant because that is when I first notice Quinten Post making a difference inside that paint area. So there's a high pick and roll for Ja Morant. Quinten Post is playing drop coverage, and watch how quickly he slides his feet to be able to stay in front of Ja Morant and not just get burned by him. And notice his stance where he's able to quickly shuffle his feet but also be in position to contest if a shot goes up, like he does on this play. It's not the greatest contest, but he definitely made Ja notice him, and his presence made a difference. And if that doesn't convince you enough, let's take a look at this play where Draymond Green is on Ja Morant from the top of the key. Morant turns up the speed, blows by Draymond, and he's about to get to the cup, but Quinten Post is right there, and that shot is out of there. And as if that wasn't good enough, let's take a look at another one where Ja Morant turns up the speed once again on Potts and just blows right by him from the half court line, and he is going full speed. And once again, Quinten Post's footwork is perfect. Ja Morant, while going full speed, does a little in and out dribble, and it does not fool Quinten Post. He follows Ja Morant all the way to the rim, aligns himself so that he can contest the shot, and gets yet another block on Ja Morant right at the rim. And in case you're not sure whether it was Quinten Post or GP2 that got to this shot, let's take a look at it from this angle. Very clear that Quinten Post blocked Ja Morant out of there. And check out this play in transition. Conchar finds himself wide open, decides to attack. Now Quinten Post is in this situation where he has to guard the penetrator and his man at the same time. And this is something that he's been able to do better than anybody on this team. As you can see, he's able to gap this situation perfectly and then is able to contest Conchar at the rim, forcing a miss while also being able to rebound at the same time. Now, let's take a look at this play. A high pick and roll for Austin Reaves. Post gets all the way up to make sure that Potts is able to recover on the screen and then dives back to his man. But then he sees that Potts is beat by Reaves, is able to track Reaves all the way down, and then is able to contest the shot perfectly timed into a miss. And here's another play where Potts gets screened off and Post is forced to guard Reaves basically from the 3-point line. And Reaves decides to go full speed, tries to blow by Quinten Post, but he's not able to do so because once again, Quinten Post is sliding his feet perfectly and so quickly and is able to stay in front of Austin Reaves. And he stops him dead in his tracks, forcing Austin Reaves to give this ball up. More high screen action for Austin Reaves on this play. Potts is reaching in, gets himself out of position, now once again forcing Quinten Post to guard Austin Reaves on the pick and roll. And there are some people who still think that Quinten Post is the same player that he was last season, slow-footed, is not able to stay in front of people, and that's just not true. Look at here once again. Austin Reaves is a very scoring-oriented player. And because Post is able to keep Reaves in front of him, Reaves once again is just forced to pass this up. Now there's another video that I made, I'll leave the link down below, and it was a film breakdown of Quinten Post against the LA Clippers where he was just absolutely incredible in that game. He just shut that entire team down. No matter who was in front of him, he shut them down. So you can watch that video for the full breakdown if you haven't seen it, but I'll just share some of the key highlights of that game from Post. Most notably, he saw Kawhi Leonard a few times, and let's see what happens each time he faced him. Here he's stuck on Kawhi in an ISO situation down in transition, and once again, look how low he gets to get in position to slide his feet and be able to contest at the same time if necessary. And that's exactly what happens here as Kawhi Leonard decides to do a step back 3-point shot, and Post is able to stop himself from sliding and lunge forward perfectly to disrupt this shot by Kawhi Leonard. And here's another one in transition where things are most difficult to stop. He's running down the floor, Kawhi Leonard has Jimmy Butler beat, and he's about to drive to his right to get all the way to the cup, but Quinten Post shows up just in time, out of nowhere. Kawhi is like, where did this guy come from? And he tries to take a shot over him anyway, but Quinten Post has a 7'2" wingspan, and just putting his hands up like this to contest really bothers Kawhi Leonard into a wild miss here. And how about this one? Kawhi is coming off the pin down, and he loses Jimmy Butler in the process, and now he has a quick 2-on-1 opportunity, and Post is once again just in perfect position, sliding his feet, forcing Kawhi to make a decision. Kawhi Leonard decides to go all the way to the rim, and he's not able to finish this because of the presence of Quinten Post once again. And if that's not convincing enough, Here's a play where Kawhi Leonard once again has an ISO opportunity against Quinten Post on an island, and most 7-footers in this scenario does not have a shot in hell of being able to stop Kawhi Leonard. But Post's ability to anticipate what is coming next, combined with his ability to just slide his feet so quickly laterally, allows him an opportunity to contest just about anybody's shot. And that's exactly what he does here on this Kawhi Leonard's mid-range shot attempt that turns into a miss. And he does the same thing to James Harden on this play. Kuminga gets completely erased out of this play, forcing Quinten Post to guard James Harden from the 3-point line. And I'm telling you, his footwork is ridiculous. Slide, 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 giving James Harden no advantage whatsoever. And with this defensive stance, he's forcing James Harden only to the baseline where Draymond Green can provide help. And just all these elite scorers, when they have Quinten Post in front of them, they're simply not able to get what they want. They're simply not able to do the scoring themselves. They're constantly having to give up on the play and look for an open guy. Yeah, it just happens over and over and over again. He just keeps sliding, and Harden sees no advantage, so he has to pass this up, and the other team keeps turning into a jump shooting team. Still not convinced? Well, here's another pick and roll for James Harden. Kuminga, once again, is erased from the screen, forcing Quinten Post to have to stay in front of James Harden, and that's exactly what he does. Slides his feet, keeps his hands up, until he slides all the way to the rim. James Harden is trying to get something at the rim, and he's not able to because Post is right there to turn this shot attempt into a comical miss. And the effectiveness on defense does not stop there. On this play, he's guarding the pick and roll once again, initially stays with James Harden, and then slides over to Zubac. And Post really worked on his strength over the summer. As you can see here, takes a big bump from Zubac, does not move an inch, and is able to turn this Zubac shot attempt into a comical miss. And in case somehow you thought that was a fluke, here's another play where Quinten Post is on Zubac, and Zubac really does not really want any part of Quinten Post. He gives the ball to Batum, who gives the ball right back to him, and he once again tries to force his way to the rim, and Post is just standing there like a brick wall and forcing Zubac into this awful turnover. You have not seen any Warriors big guard Zubac to this extent for the last 2 years at least. To further display Post and his strength in this particular game, here he is guarding John Collins. John Collins is a strong guy, and he's trying to force his way to the rim, and look at him get completely stood up here. Post is not going anywhere and forces Collins into this difficult shot that turns into a miss. Now let's raise the stakes up a notch against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's start with SGA. High screen for SGA. Kuminga, as usual, gets erased off the screen, and now Post is on an island against SGA. So SGA starts dancing around, does a little step back pump fake, thinking that that's going to get Quinten Post. It does not get him off his feet, and there is nothing more for him to do in this situation but to give the ball up. There is another play where Kuminga shows once again comical ineptitude, and SGA is just able to get ahead of him without even a screen, and that once again forces Quinten Post to guard SGA straight up. And of course, once again, Quinten Post is able to stay in front of SGA, forcing him to pass this up. And if you're still not buying it when it comes to this matchup, I'll show you yet another play where this time Buddy Hield gets erased off this screen. Once again, forcing Quinten Post to guard SGA one-on-one out in the perimeter. I'm telling you, there are not many 7-foot players in this league, if at all, that is able to stay in front of SGA and forcing him into difficult shots like this that turns into a miss. And at this point, I gotta ask you, if Quinten Post can keep everybody from Kawhi Leonard, James Harden to SGA to be able to stay in front of those guys and not get blown by or anything like that, and not only that, but is also persistently able to put him in position to be able to contest these shots and turn them into difficult mid-range looks. This ability for him to gap the situation whenever he's guarding a pick and roll, to be able to guard both the ball handler and his own man, or have this switch ability where he is able to guard the best players on the planet and keep them in that mid-range and never get blown by or beat off the dribble, anything like this. That should already let you know that Quinten Post is one of the best defensive centers in the entire NBA. Quinten Post can literally guard anybody from anywhere and contest any shot from everywhere. And here's yet another example of that, where he's guarding Jalen Williams. And look at here, Jalen Williams thinks that he can hezzy dribble away from Quinten Post. He cannot, so he's forced forced to reset. Post is not going anywhere, so he settles for this difficult 3-point shot, which of course is well contested, and it's a miss. And look at Williams in transition on this play. He thinks it's about to be sweet. He's going all the way to the rim. He's gonna try to bump Post off, and he just can't do it. Post's presence is just too great and forces Williams into this completely wild miss. And once again, another matchup between Post and Williams. Williams thinks that he can go to his left and drive by Post. He cannot, and he is forced to a stop, going nowhere, giving up the ball, and once again, Quinten Post turning a team into a jump shooting team. This time, Aaron Wiggins decides to try Quinten Post, and this is yet another ISO situation. Aaron Wiggins is a great player, and he also tries to dance around Quinten Post, who's not moving an inch. Aaron Wiggins cannot drive around Post, so he settles for a step back 3-point shot. Once again, Post is able to contest the shot beautifully into a miss. And all these players seem to want to try Post at least twice, so here's another one where Aaron Wiggins once again has a one-on-one opportunity against Quinten Post. There's a lot of dribbling going on here, and he's just not able to shed Quinten Post whatsoever, and eventually ends up turning the ball over because he travels on this play. It's just something that Quinten Post is consistently able to do, is force players into a very difficult shot if they decide to shoot over him, or Post's defense is just so good that it just completely deters a primary offensive player from wanting to even attempt a shot. You see here, Avdia is initially about to be wide open in the paint, and then Quinten Post recovers. Avdia tries to throw up a pump fake to no avail, and he's forced to give this back up. We're just gonna keep looking at one play after another. Here's some against Devin Booker. Devin Booker on this play is able to blow by Kuminga, and he's at the rim, but Quinten Post, of course, is there to meet him with perfect verticality and forces Booker into a miss at the rim. Here's another play on the Devin Booker pick and roll. Post hedges hard to make sure he gives Kuminga time to recover, slides back to his man very quickly, and then is able to get in the way of Devin Booker, who tries to make a pass, but Post intercepts and it becomes a steal. And how about this play? Devin Booker has pots on him. He's ready to try to cook him, and he's looking to attack, get all the way to the cup, but he cannot because Quinten Post is right there. So he's forced to give it up, turn it into a reset, and now O'Neal has the ball at the top of the key. He pump fakes Steph Curry into a jump, and he's driving into the paint, but guess who's in front of him? Quinten Post. O'Neal feels his presence, gets pressured, makes a pass to the corner to nobody, and it's a turnover. And his presence once again is not just limited to the smaller players. Look at here, he pump fakes the 3-point shot, is able to drive by Jimmy Butler. That's a pretty impressive move for a center, and he is trying to do the Statue of Liberty dunk on Quinten Post, and he's not able to because Quinten Post is there for the contest and forced that dunk into a miss. Here's another play where Draymond is late to recover on Huff, but Quinten Post is right there to deter him from driving this time. And the corner man is about to beat Potts off the dribble, but he has nowhere to go because Quinten Post is right there blocking the baseline. So the pass is made to the open man, Bradley, right under the rim, but Post recovers and is right there to force this horrible miss point blank at the rim. And how about this play? Zion Williams, a locomotive going full speed in transition, going all the way to the cup, and it doesn't matter how big he is, Quinten Post is willing to meet anybody at the rim. And look at speedy little Jeremiah Fears here in a one-on-one opportunity against Quinten Post. Thinks that he's going to be able to get around him easily, is not able to. Quinten Post can slide his feet literally against anybody out in the perimeter and is able to bother Fears into a miss on this shot. So given that Post can stay in front of anybody, of course he's able to stay in front of Evan Mobley from the 3-point line here. Mobley goes to his left, takes very long strides thinking he can get all the way to the cup. He cannot, and Post forces him into this comically terrible miss. And here's more of that pick and roll coverage. Mobley cuts to the rim and gets all the way to the cup, but Post is able to meet him there and completely block this shot in a very clutch situation with under 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And look at here, yet another clutch situation. Under 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Quinten Post is in trouble. It's a 2-on-1 situation for Tyson. He drives all the way to the rim, and Post and his verticality is absolutely amazing for a 7-footer with a 7'2" wingspan to be able to contest shots so perfectly, so timely. The anticipation skills are off the charts, and this is yet another miss at the rim. The paint area is closed when Quinten Post is in the vicinity. And as if all that wasn't enough, Quinten Post is able to contest 3-point shots, recover on 3-point shooters all the time. He never just stands there like a 7-footer normally would. Just sit in the paint and watch somebody shoot from the 3-point line. No, he's always running out and he's always recovering and he's always contesting and forcing the shooter to recognize that there's a defender there. I mean, look at all these plays and look at how far he is. And for him to do everything that he does defensively, the pick and roll coverages, erasing all the mistakes of his teammates inside that paint area, he still goes out to the 3-point line and contests everything. And unlike Draymond, who is 6'6", Quinten Post is a 7-footer and he's just simply able to bother shots a lot better than Draymond can at this juncture of his career. So for anybody who questions whether Quinten Post can continue to play the type of defense that he's been playing, well, you have to ask yourself, is the strength that he gained over the summer, is that real? Yes, he's made it very clear that he can guard just about anybody in that paint. He's also shown that no matter what player is in front of him, he can slide his feet laterally with the best of them. It just doesn't even make any sense how well he moves, but that's what he does. And is his ability to anticipate real? Yes, he's so amazing at not biting on pump fakes, is able to stay on his feet until it's time to contest a shot. So no matter what star is in front of him, he's able to force all of those guys into mid-range jump shots that are contested and basically never get blown by. And because he's so quick on his feet, he's able to guard that pick and roll by being able to gap the situation better than anybody else on this team, including Draymond. And the most beautiful thing about Quinten Post is that he does not take any possessions off. He is a possession by possession defender. And those are the types of guys. If you defend every single possession and you do it amazingly just about every time, that is what makes you become a playoff caliber player and possibly even a championship caliber player. So as you can see, the film overwhelmingly supports the stats when it comes to his defensive rating, his plus minus, his impact on the margin for victory, his impact when he's not on the floor is all so real for the Warriors. I hope you enjoyed looking over all that film as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching. Exciting times are ahead for the Warriors, largely because of the presence and the development of Quinten Post.